What's up, family? Thank you for tuning in to the DreamNation podcast. My name is Casanova. I'll be your host, and I'm excited to be bringing to you entrepreneurs, thought leaders, and trailblazers from around the world. Stay locked in with us because we're about to go on a journey that will change your life. What's up, Dream Nation? Today on the line, we have a special man. We have Mr. Jesse Todisco. Jesse, you want to go ahead and say what's up to Dream Nation?
Hey, Dream Nation. It's exciting times to be here. I'm excited to spread the message and be out in front of y'all. Thanks so much for having me.
Yeah, well, we're definitely excited to have you here. I always like to kick this off, and I know that you've had so many accolades in life and you've overcome so many, things of adversity, but I like to always go back. If we could go back 25, 30 years and before, the financial advising and all the awards and accolades, before you crushing it on Instagram and with your personal brand now and being able to grow your brand across the country, tell me, who is Jesse Todisco?
Sure. So, I grew up in a part of Boston called East Boston, and it was very much like a fighting town. I grew up with no money. We were poor, but I didn't really know it because, my single mom did a really good job of protecting us against those things. But we were definitely poor. There were times where in the winter in Boston, we didn't have heat and we had to use the stove. And one time my mom was using the stove and something caught on fire and I woke up to a burning house essentially. So there were some fun times there. But, outside of those one-offs, even though we were poor, we lived right on the water. So my view as a kid was I lived right near the beach. There was all sorts of things going on I was able to get into and have fun with. So I didn't know I was poor until you realize that you don't have things that other people kind of have, right? Or you go without. So growing up kind of in that tough environment, I grew up in a town where everybody thinks they're the toughest guy in the world. And so I actually was bullied for some years going through, I went to Catholic school from kindergarten to 8th grade. And it doesn't sound like a crazy place to be, but we were in between two projects. Like there was the Orient Heights projects and the Maverick projects. And our schools were kind of situated in the middle. So there was a lot of overflow of just rough and tumble people. And I remember for years getting my ass kicked walking to and from school, and I'd be afraid to go places because I didn't want to get my ass kicked. And it was weird because I would get jumped every day by 3 or 4 dudes, but I never I was afraid to fight back, number one, and it was just the fear that was gripping me that I learned to overcome later in life. But it never really hurt me. It was just what the hell is going on? I'm getting jumped. It's a weird, surreal place to be, but it set me up in life to be super successful, taking those beatings in business and not giving up, right? Going through that, growing up playing sports, baseball, basketball, football, just trying to find my way in life. I had some outside influences that kind of really shaped me to who I am today. And, this covers a span of some years. So just to kind of go through it, my father, who I just lost last year in September, he was a 40-year heroin addict. And so I lived and saw that every day. And come to my house, my mom and dad were actually never married, but they lived about 3 miles from each other. And so he'd come to my house in the holidays begging me for money. And so I just had this kind of really screwed up childhood, but I always was very optimistic. And I don't know if it was natural or if it was a coping mechanism, but it was something that I always kind of had. And so even though I had these bad role models, there was always this spark inside of me to want to be around people and want to run a business. And I didn't know what that meant. So when I was a kid, I was buying and selling and trading baseball cards, comic books. I was shoveling snow up in Boston, for pennies on the dollar, my neighbors just trying to make some money. So I had this entrepreneurial spirit, but as a kid, I didn't know what that meant. I just knew that I liked doing these things, and that would set the tone for my career and becoming an entrepreneur. But kind of getting back to the rough and tumble stuff, I went through a period where I fell in the trap of, a lot of my friends were selling drugs and doing drugs, and I grew up in an environment where that's really heavy, especially my dad, who was doing it for so long, that I fell into that trap too. I actually started selling drugs. I started with weed, no big deal, I guess, right? I actually started hiring people and I would pay them with weed. So they'd go out and they would sell, nickels and dimes. And I'd be like, here, just keep a little for yourself. And I'll take the cash. And so I was still very enterprising, but I didn't have the right role models. I didn't really know where to turn. And so I was just kind of going off of just guesswork. So even though I was doing those things, I was still putting myself through college. I went to a community college, was kind of walking around aimlessly, didn't know what I wanted to do, but I knew business attracted me. So I went to school for business, and I went to school and I learned some business principles. And I was like, this is really exciting, but I don't have the money or kind of some of the other infrastructure to like put me where I should be. So I had to take the long road to get there. In the side hustle of kind of trying to still, sell weed and all that stuff, there was a new drug that came out at the time called OxyContin, which is basically like heroin in a pill. And I started selling that. And I remember I tried it one time and it made me sick, terribly sick. I was like, I'll never do this again, which was good because in those songs like Biggie's like or Scarface, you don't want to get high in your own supply. And so you don't want to sell something you're going to not make money on. So I was like, I'm good doing this. I did it for about a year. And then I ended up moving in with my dad. My mom left Boston to move back. She's from Kentucky, was from Kentucky. And I didn't want to go to Kentucky. I'm a Boston kid. I have my ex-wife, who at that time was my girlfriend, was in Boston. I was like, I'm not leaving Boston. And so I ended up moving in with my dad. And that was really kind of where everything turned pinnacly for me. I had to hit bottom before I could rise up. So I moved in with my dad. I saw his daily habits. I saw him chasing, getting high, chasing the dragon, as they would say. And I actually fell into it a little bit harder. So I started using more of my own product, if you will. And eventually it turned into about a year-long heroin habit that I had. So I had about 2.5 years of drug use that kind of stunted my growth. But every day that I would do it, I would always think to myself, like, this isn't my life. Like, I need to be doing something more. And so eventually that all came to a halt. I hit my final straw. I was just done after the 2.5 years that I had been in that world. The first time I tried to kick drugs, I tried to run away from my problems. I actually joined the military. And so I was in the Navy for a little over 2 years. But my demons, I never corrected them. I never fixed them. And so they came back to haunt me. My mom, she got sick with cancer in about 2004. And she was military as well. And so I had some people in my family that were military, and that was kind of a basis for my background, but I never saw myself joining the military. So after September 11, 2001, to back it up a little bit, I was inspired to do something, but I didn't know what I wanted to do. So it took me a few years. It took going through that drug habit to say, you know what, I need to change. I need to go do something different. I need to do something bigger than myself. So I dropped out of that 2-year community college I was in. I probably was there for 2.5 years and only amassed like a 1.5 years worth of credits because I was so wayward. But I went and joined the military, and I squared up right away, like they call it being squared away, or Joe Navy. Like I was really in it to win it. I did really well. I went through boot camp. I became what's called the Master at Arms. And so the Master at Arms in boot camp there was 77 guys in my group. I was in a 900 division. The 900 division meant that you were the most fit and the best scoring on the ASVAB, which is the test that you use to get into the military. And it was like the best of those people, the enlisted people. And so I had a shot at redemption. So I went in there, took all my entrepreneurial skill, my hustle, my work ethic that I did do throughout the course of life. And I became like the top 2 guy, number 1 and number 2 out of 77 guys for all of boot camp. I did the honor guard, which is when you would go to graduations and you would spin rifles and do ceremonies with the flag. And so I had like this purpose and I felt great. But I never cleared those demons, so to speak. And so when I was in the military, after 2 years, catching back up to where I was, about my mom being sick, my mom was sick. They said she has stage 3C cancer, which is close to terminal. It's right at terminal. And I thought she was going to die. And so I go to my commanding officer and I say, I'd like to get some leave to go back to Boston to see my mom because she's going to die. And at the time, I may have just taken a vacation, whatever, something happened, but I couldn't take any more leave. So I'm like, all right, crap. So I didn't know what to do. I turned to the ship's chaplain, which is like the priest of the ship. And I got his advice, and he said, I can't tell you what to do, but you got to do what's in your heart. So essentially, off the record, he was saying, go see your mom. In my mind is what I thought he was saying. So I ended up going AWOL for 2 weeks. I left the Navy in Norfolk, Virginia Beach. I flew back up to Boston. And mind you, this was during a time of war where, old school, if you leave and you desert during a time of war, you can be killed. Now, they don't do that anymore, but that's like the old bylaws or whatever, right?
Right.
So I ended up going back up to Boston. My mom just is fresh out of ovarian cancer surgery. They removed her ovaries and some other stuff. And I saw her, what I thought was on her deathbed. And I had to come to peace with like a lot of things that had been through, my mom being prior service, prior Army during a time where women weren't really, not that they weren't accepted, but they got a lot of crap for being in the military. Like she was very tough to the point where growing up, when she would want to discipline us at a certain point, if verbally wasn't working, she would look at us, my sister and I, and say, go pick a belt And usually the belts I would pick would be like the thickest one she had, like just to kind of like give it back to her a little bit. But so I had this tough figure in my life on my mother's side. She was like kind of the disciplinarian, but she was still trying to be strong. When I saw her deathbed, it completely broke me down. So like that tough exterior growing up, I was like, okay, like I just need to reset my life. I'm seeing my mom die here. Like I got to do the right thing. So I ended up going back to the Navy. I went to what's called Captain's Mast, and Captain's Mast is where you basically they give you your penance or tell you what you're in for. And so I got restriction, which is you have to stay on the ship for 30 days, and then your pay is docked by half, essentially. So it wasn't too bad. I had an apartment off the ship, so I didn't live there for a while. And then after being back there for a while, I couldn't get my mind around my mom almost dying in my mind, or still thinking she was going to die. So I left again. I left the military again. This time it was like what I was for good. I just completely disappeared from the military. And I went back to Boston. I went back to that old life, got back into like that later part, the ending part of my drug habit. And after a total of 2.5 years cumulatively of doing drugs, a little bit before and a little bit after of the military service, I was just sick and tired of the whole thing. And honestly, it could be God's choosing. It could be fate, whatever you want to call it. My sister, I have two sisters. The second one was living in Georgia. 2006, she said, come down to Georgia. I know like you're kind of trying to figure out your way in life. Come down for 3 months and just check it out. And so I did. And so I ended up getting high one more time. I shot heroin one more time. I took a 30-hour Greyhound bus down from Boston to Georgia. And my life completely changed since 2006. So moved down to Georgia. I go cold turkey, which really wasn't, my mind was focused on getting somewhere. So it wasn't as hard as I think it could be for some people. That's the last time I ever did drugs, was 2006. And I found a company that was hiring at the time that was doing, they had like a franchisee opportunity. So if you could get into this company and you could learn how to sell, and this was outside sales, this was cold call, this is commission, this is going door to door, business to business. This is the hardest of the hard kind of sales. But for me, it was business. They were guaranteeing me a certain amount of money every week, and I got to talk to people, which I love to do. I was like, I'll give it a shot. Plus, it was geared around sports and entertainment. So if you can think about Groupon, Groupon gives you discounts to go use like sporting events tickets or spa services or discounts here and there. That's what we were selling, but we were walking around doing it instead of like doing it online. So I got really good at this. I did it for the first time. So I'm in Atlanta. I did it for 3 months. In that time, you're charged with taking out other people and showing them the business, so to speak. It's multi-level marketing in the sense of you're always recruiting and you're always bringing people on, but it's not something where you have to buy something and like, keep buying product. Like it's just a sales job, but you want to replace yourself and you want to recruit people, because the more people you can recruit, you build a team, get out of the field, you don't have to sell anymore, and then you go and learn the office, the back office, and then you can learn how to run the business, so to speak. And so it was up to me, based on my work ethic and how quickly I could train people, to get out of the field. And so once I got into this business, it was about 13 months. I ended up going from entry-level door-to-door sales to becoming a franchisee of this business. I opened up an office in Charlotte, North Carolina. So we moved from Atlanta to Charlotte, North Carolina, right around 2007. So the end of 2006, 2007. And then I ended up growing my office. We started with just 3 people, myself, my now wife, who wasn't my wife at the time, but back then we were just kind of business partners. And one of our best friends to this day. We go open up an office in Charlotte, North Carolina, and we blow this thing up. We bring on clients like the Charlotte Bobcats, the Carolina Speed, which is like an AFL kind of football team, maybe a different league, but similar. Tire Kingdom, which is like National Tire and Battery, local spas, golf courses. So we're out there selling, fun and entertainment at a discount. And we took it from 3 people to about 35 people. And plus we brought on a partner. He brought in 20 people. So we had about 60 people in this one office going crazy every day, doing outside sales, which was like very, very surreal. Seeing all these people, there was no chairs in the office. People were drinking energy drinks and coffee, and they were practice pitching the whole time. It was like a little boiler room of salespeople. It was really fun. So we did that for a few years, 3 years. Took out 4 or 5 other people to put them in their own opportunity. So they became franchisees, essentially. And so now I'm getting like an override on their office plus the sales of my office, and I'm doing well. Poor kid from Boston. So I went out like anybody else who didn't know anything about money, and I spent a lot of my money. Cars, phones, clothes, like BS that didn't matter. But I was living my life and I was young. So what happened after about 3 years of running this business was my wife at that time, my girlfriend, Alicia, we got pregnant. And, as they say in the South, we were living in sin. So we were just, roommates, and we got pregnant and all this good stuff. And we had this healthy pregnancy, this full-term healthy pregnancy. But my wife goes into labor, and she's in labor for 40 hours. And our daughter comes out injured at delivery. And so they think at some point that the umbilical cord or her airway was compromised. So when she was born, my wife uses this term floppy. She wasn't deceased, but she came out needing intensive care immediately. And there was no signs of life outside of life supports, the life support machines. So after 7 days of her being on life support, we decided, based on what the doctors were recommending and the zero signs of life unsupported, that we should let her go home, let her go back. And so we let her go. And I held her in my arms until she took her last breath, which if you see in the movies when people pass away, at like something like that, it's usually pretty quick. This was a good 10 to 15 minutes of her like gasping for air. So it was a really weird time. You don't expect yourself to ever hold your child until they pass away. So my wife and I try to go back to normal life, which obviously we weren't equipped to deal with this. And so I go to work heavier and harder. I'm working 7 days a week. I'm working 12-hour days at minimum, burying myself in my work. And I'm supposed to be this jovial, excited leader of a team of 30 outside salespeople that go out every day and eat a ton of no's and like get a ton of rejection every day. And I feel like a fraud because I don't even want to get out of bed because I just lost my daughter. And so after a few months of trying to hide it, so to speak, from the world, I just somewhat imploded. And I at that time, I talk about quitting. At that time, I did quit and I shut my business down. And I actually turned over part of the business to one of my franchisees and then just got away from the rest of it. My wife decided and I decided to get back to working part-time, which is 40 to 50 hours a week at that time. And we got back, she's from Georgia. So we came back to Georgia from Charlotte, 3 years in Charlotte, came back to Georgia, and we started working back in corporate, which for me, always being entrepreneurial and independent kind of killed me a little bit, but I needed to bolster that side of the resume. I needed to make more connections. I needed to build my brand, if you will, right? And get my street cred up, right? So I ended up going into banking, and it kicked off a finance career that I've been running ever since, right around 2011. So I got into banking. I started off as a banker, and then I moved my way up to a branch manager very quickly, and then like a vice president, business banker, and then I became one of the top 9 bankers in all of Georgia. SunTrust. SunTrust was the biggest bank down here at the time. And so I was doing really well with my banking career, but I always still wanted to get back to being independent. I wanted to get back to running my own business. Working for somebody else was cool, but like it wasn't what I wanted to do. So I had built that career. I had done it for 4 or 5 years, had the success. And at that time, because of being in banking and because learning how to cash flow myself, learning how to teach clients how to cash flow, individuals and businesses, learning about lending, credit management, learning about the very basics of financial planning, set the tone for the rest of my career. As I was in banking, I saw financial planning, and I saw these financial planners that would meet with clients and help them make money and grow their net worth, and that really attracted me. So my goal was to become a financial planner at this point, but as fate would have it, before I became a full-blown financial planner, State Farm came knocking on my door, and they said, we see your stuff on LinkedIn. We see that you've been in banking for years. We see that you've been a business owner. What do you think about being an agent? And I was like, well, I don't want to sell like home and auto policies for the rest of my life. I want to be a financial planner. At the time, and I think they may have it now, they have their own brokerage, meaning they do have a financial planning arm of their business. They're also a bank. And so I had done the banking piece, and they do everything a real bank does, like a brick and mortar bank. So I was like, that makes sense. I want to become a financial planner. I want to get back to being a business owner. Let me go work at State Farm and become an agent. So I went into their agent training program, or not even agent internship. So I went right to school learning about State Farm and right about their products and about their services. And after 9 months of an agent internship, I became an agent where I had my own brick and mortar, had 3 employees that I hired, and we were off to the races. We were hitting our goals. My role was to manage the day-to-day, but also to handle the financial planning conversations. And I had a team of people that would focus more on the insurance side. So during that process, I met a gentleman, I'll use that term lightly, who was my sales leader. And this person had control of my first 12 months contract. So at the end of 12 months, that person could say, we don't want you as a State Farm agent anymore because of whatever reason. And this person and I, Casanova, we did not get along at all. We didn't see eye to eye. He was my Lex Luthor to my Superman, using a comic book reference from back in the day. Everything he told me, I just felt like I felt like I needed a shower every time I was done talking to this guy. So we didn't hit it off, to the point where 2 weeks before I opened my office, this guy who's in control of my future comes into my office as I'm painting the walls, like to get my office open for a grand opening 2 weeks later, like busting my ass, like ready to go. And he comes in and he gets into a conversation with me, a confrontation as well, about a new phone that he had. And I didn't care about his new phone, and I offended him or something like that. And it just turned into this weird dynamic of me like turning around, and I said, hey, listen, how is this helping either one of us? Like, how am I getting better? How are you getting better by this conversation? And I just knew at that point that this wasn't going to be for me. So I stuck it out for probably a total of like a year and a half. And then I went to my wife and I'm like, listen, I want to get back to being a true business owner. I don't want to work for anyone else, because at State Farm, even though you're independent, you still have to answer to other people. I decided that it wasn't going to be something that was going to be long-term. So we needed to shut it off now before we got over leveraged with debt, before, we got too far into the game. And my wife and I sat down and said, you know what, we're going to shut down the State Farm, but before you go do anything else, I want you to go make sure you're interviewing with other companies before you go start your own company. So it was like that last checkpoint, shutting down State Farm in January of 2017, and opening up Todisco Financial in February of 2018. And before I got to Todisco Financial, I had to interview with about 5 or 6 different companies, 5 or 6 financial planning firms, firms that were worldwide, like brand recognition. Every time I went to go interview with these companies, they were great people, but it just wasn't my company. It wasn't my vision. So I took all that experience of life, of business, running my own business before, being in banking, getting some more financial planning education at State Farm, and putting all that together. Plus I learned some insurance, like life insurance stuff at State Farm, and put all that together to create Todisco Financial in February 2017. Where I said, screw it, I'm going independent, which at that point I still wasn't fully independent, because I had a relationship with a broker dealer that I had to do transactions with and through. It had oversight of my business, but it was the best move I ever made. So at that point I had just turned 35, and I figured out for the first time in my life what I wanted to do when I grew up, which was become a fully independent financial planner. And so I've been running that business since February of 2017. We've grown year over year. And we opened up a second company called 46 and 2 Wealth Partners, which 46 and 2 is just a play on human evolution. So it's all about evolving and growing together. And so that business will allow me to be completely independent as a registered investment advisory, where I can do full service financial planning and help a client go from point A to point B and do it efficiently and do it while they're young, or at least enjoy life now versus waiting till retirement to enjoy life. So teaching people how to live well now while never running out of money is the goal.
Got it. Where do you think where have you seen like most new investors, where do they go wrong at as far as financial planning?
Yep. So the biggest piece, the foundation to financial planning is knowing what your cash flow is and knowing where your money comes in and where it goes out. So when it comes down to it, and I give this to every single one of my clients, having a strong basis, a budget, and there's a few different ways that I do this with clients, but basically knowing what's coming in and knowing what's going out, and then determining where to stop if there's any leaks. Like a lot of times people are overspending on certain business owners. Having that budget in place and being able to cash flow, because cash is oxygen. As a business owner, you need cash to be able to market, to be able to go out and, for yourself, being in real estate, if you're buying properties or if you're buying different things for different businesses, you need to have money to do those things. And if you don't have a firm grasp on your cash flow, then you're not going to be able to do those things efficiently or at all. So the first checkpoint I teach my clients. It's akin to what Dave Ramsey talks about as having $1,000 emergency fund. I talk to my clients about how to, without costing them any money, find another $1,000 in their what's going on now with their income. And then now they have $1,000 for if someone in their family has a minor emergency, small car accident. It's a small peace of mind. And then we take that training that I've shown them how to do that, and then I build up anywhere from 3 to 6 months of what's called their break even. So for an individual family, 3 to 6 months or 3 months of their break even would be their mortgage, their insurances, their car notes, things they have to pay for. Their break even, let's call it $5,000 a month. I want them to have anywhere from $5,000 to $15,000 cash saved in case something happens to someone's income. It's a peace of mind. You bought yourself some time. It's not gonna solve everything, but it's most people, 61% of people in the United States don't even have $1,000 saved up in their cash accounts. So 3 months of your money saved up is huge for a lot of people. And then for my business owner clients, I teach them to have 6 months and I show them how to get there. So the basis where most people get it wrong is their budgeting and having cash flow.
Got it. Now, when you say that you got to have 3 months, you save up this 1,000, where do you recommend putting that money?
It's a great question. So depending on what type of person you are, depending on what kind of access you need, the old school mentality was I want to have a brick and mortar, right? And I'll talk about brick and mortar and non-brick and mortar. So brick and mortar is your local Bank of America, Wells Fargo on the corner where you can walk in, you can shake someone's hand or you can choke them if you need to. But you go to a bank that, number one, you got to find the right person to do banking with. So this is where I speak to a lot because I used to be a branch manager. I used to be a banker. You want to have a banker or branch manager that, number one, knows what they're doing, and number two, can help you without asking someone else's permission. And what I mean by that is this. So if a client has like a non-sufficient fund fee or if they need to make a transaction, you want the person that you're dealing with to be able to handle that transaction. You don't want them to have to go get approval from like a regional manager or somebody else above them. So number one, finding a bank where someone can basically do what they say they're going to do and honor that word, and then free everything. I don't want any of my clients paying for any checking accounts. If they can get free checks, like don't let the banks take our money and then charge us for it, right? And so that's a big piece, is finding a good brick and mortar that has all the services you need, online banking, whatever else, mobile deposit if you're a business owner, or you can be virtual. And some of my clients do some transactions through like PayPal or Venmo, but you want to have an account where you can do a virtual bank. Capital One offers a great virtual bank product. I think it's called the Checking 360 account. I think it's free. If you're okay with not going to a virtual brick and mortar bank, there's a lot of good virtual options out there that are free as well.
Got it. No, I love it. And so for me, I always tell my clients in real estate, the smaller the bank, the better. And I think it goes right along with what you're saying, because there's so much less red tape. They don't have to get permission. Like you said, most of the times they're already sitting in the meetings with the actual president or the owner of the bank if you're at a smaller bank. And there's a reason. If they only have 1 or 2 locations, there's most likely a reason why they're still in business. Is because they value those relationships and they sharpen their pencil very well for the clients who have already been banking with them for quite some time, to make sure that they can help them. That's how they stay in business. So I love that tip right there that you gave.
I absolutely agree, man. I mean, just it's all about in life, and this, you're a relationship guy. It's all about who you know, like in the sense of, yes, you need to be prepared. Yes, you need to know your stuff. You need to be able to deliver. But you can't do any of that stuff until you have a handshake with someone to do those things with. So it's who you know and then what you know, right? You got to have both very equal. But if you don't have relationships, you can't really go anywhere. So it's definitely the local banks are huge. I used to be in big banking. I can tell you that a lot of big banking just doesn't really care about their people, about their clients. So finding that local bank where you have a banker that's out in the community or branch manager, and a lot of places to find these people is a good tip, is local networking groups. So like if there's a Chamber of Commerce, if there's a BNI, a Power Corps, Master Networks, all these groups that are out there always have a banker. I used to do it all the time as a banker to try to find more clients. And so that's a good way to find these people.
We love it. There it is. There's a nugget right there. BNI is all across the country. It's they have their own local chapters, and a lot of the times you can find people that are all in different industries. And it does cost, but you got to see it as an investment to understand that if you get a couple clients out of there, or if you're able to build a relationship which can save you thousands and thousands of dollars, or potentially even just help you get into a business, that's so powerful.
That's absolutely huge. Yep.
Tell me, like, right now, lots of people are working W-2 jobs, and a lot of people are getting out. Now, if you're working a W-2 job right now, tell me what's something that people are not doing that they can, like, because the normal thing is to say max out your 401k, right?
Yeah.
That's what's told to a lot of people. For somebody else that's saying, hey, I'm already maxing out my 401k, what's something else that they can be doing to try to make sure that they can gain an edge on what they're already doing, if that makes sense?
I love that. It's a great question, and that's something that I get for a living. So the first thing I would tell someone, even if just let's say they're not a financial planning client, let's just say they're a friend, and I have a lot of friends that are clients, but let's just say they're just someone who's asking for that advice. I would say this: find another way to have a revenue stream coming in that you don't have to trade time for, right? So you're trading all these W-2 people, right? They're trading time for money, which is fine. They're going to a job, they may like it or not, whatever, and they're trading 40 to 50, 60 hours a week for a paycheck. And that's how most people were taught, right? And that's a conversation for the next time. But I don't know if I believe in that way. But the one thing you can do is get another revenue stream going. And preferably, if they're entrepreneurial minded, they want to get away from being a W-2 employee, start getting another revenue stream built on the side, as Gary Vee would call it, like a side hustle, and work your nights and your weekends and go ahead and build up that business, right? If it's e-com, if it's social media marketing, if it's being a financial planner, if it's real estate, you can put in the work if it's a passion, and you can start getting trickles of income coming in, and it may motivate you to do it more. And if you do it enough, maybe it replaces your income totally, or you keep working and you have now two incomes. Because here's the thing, I'm big on numbers for my profession, but I think statistics, a lot of times they're made up or made to show a certain thing. So I think statistics are basic. They say 74% of statistics are made up, which is like a joke in itself. But I did hear a statistic that most millionaires have up to 7 revenue streams, additional revenue streams outside of their main one. And that's how they become millionaires, because they have other money working for them while they're sleeping. So that's the concept. The practicality of it would be, listen, I mentioned Gary Vee's name before. He had an impression on me years ago. I've kind of gotten away from his content, but just because I'm doing my own stuff. But he goes out to yard sales, and this guy's a multi-millionaire, multi-billionaire almost, right? He's getting close, right? So it's like he goes out to yard sales for fun. He finds little knickknacks. He finds little sports paraphernalia. He finds all these things, and he goes and reposts it on wherever else, eBay, whatever. And he's selling these things, making a few $100 a week. So like that's another little easy way to do it. It's just that you got to find something that you're interested in. Could become just a side hustle, or maybe become your own business, but get into it and put the extra time into it, and then start building out those additional revenue streams. But other products and services in the financial space, that would be more of a detailed conversation, because everyone's different. But if someone can think about the revenue, additional revenue streams, side hustles, whatever you want to call them, that would be a good place to start, because it doesn't take a lot to get started.
Yeah, and I love that, because you also, once you have that business, especially if it's real estate, you're able to then offset a lot of your taxes, because you have tax depreciation and other tax advantages that you can use to your advantage. So that's what I love. I mean, obviously, just like you said, everyone's different. You have things like SEP IRAs and things like that people can do. But no, I love that tip. If you can figure out something that you can do right now that you're already interested in, and like what you said, what Gary Vee always talks about is arbitraging, which is buying somewhere at a discount and then flipping somewhere else for retail. And so arbitraging is so big. I remember I used to do this for cell phones, and this was like 3.5 years ago. And yeah, you would just find one on Facebook swap group or anything like that, and then you go buy the cell phone, and maybe it's $400, but you know that you could sell it on eBay for $650, $700. You do that 3 to 4 times a week, at $300 a pop, that's $1,200. What could that do for you? So I love that tip as well. That's super big. Now you expressed that you had so much, adversity that you had to overcome. If we dive back in a little bit and talk about it, like, did you always have a mentor? Did you always have a uncle or someone else who was like, hey, this is not your way? Or how did you get through all of that adversity? Besides just saying I was optimistic, was there anybody pulling you along, or was it you just all willpower?
So it's a combination of a couple things. I had heroes growing up, but a lot of them were found through, watching sports, I was a huge, I don't know if this will convey to today's generation as much, but I was a huge Jordan fan growing up, and like watching what he was doing with business outside of basketball, like in my mind, greatest basketball player ever, right? But also one of the greatest business people ever, and paved the way for a lot of these folks that are in sports now, and a lot of entrepreneurs, on how to have multiple revenue streams and how to have a brand and how to be, into fashion, into colognes, into, he's all over the place, hot dogs and underwear. And like, he just was able to take his brand before brands were really a thing. And like, he paved the way for like a lot of people in business. So I learned a lot by watching other people that interested me, even if they weren't people that I knew. So my family were like, half of them were poor. The other half were like either blue collar, or in like this small section. Some of them were business people in my family. So I did see some people that had companies, and I looked up to them, and I would always ask them questions. And my thing was this: to answer your questions, the two-part. When I was younger, I didn't have a specific coach outside of like my sports coaches or like mentors, but I always asked questions. Like and that's probably why, I have a podcast like yourself today. And when I meet with clients, my job outside of this meeting here is to listen 90% of the time, because I like asking questions and learning about people. And so I would always seek out answers. But what I did as I got older and started making some money, if I needed to fly out to a conference, or if I needed to connect with somebody, and you actually just went to a conference where I met you at EvolveCon in Omaha, where my coach and mentor, Patrick, he's my current coach and mentor today. So to sum it all up, growing up, I did what I could to find the information. As I got older and into like maybe the last 5 or 6 years, I started seeking people out, seeking coaches out, whether they were friends that I admired, people that were in business in the community that I wanted to link up with and grow with, or having a professional coach that I've hired. I've had one before, Patrick. She was great, but she wasn't in my realm. And so there was things that I needed that she couldn't give me. So we parted ways friends. And I found someone that was kind of my tribe, like someone who I had never met before, but we had a lot of the same mentality. Even though we had different life experiences, what makes it really cool to have the relationship, we had a lot of the same ambitions. And I look at Patrick like he's about 10 years ahead of where I'm going to be, so to speak. He can help me get there. But the cool thing is there's a lot of things he's told me that I've taught him. So having that dynamic with someone that you trust, that you admire, that you know that you can get somewhere with and help them as well. It's called the beautiful handshake. If you can help somebody get where they want to be as well as you get where you want to be, that's what I look for now. But yeah, I do have a coach and mentor to this day.
Got it. I love it. And so one of the best pieces of advice that I've gotten in the last year is you cannot, no matter how great you are, you cannot coach yourself.
Yeah.
Right. And if you think about that, Michael Jordan, who you've already referenced to, and all of the people who we look up and we admire right now, I'm sure even Jay-Z, Beyonce, like maybe Jay not, but I'm sure he's had some mentors along the way, but they all had some type of coaches or some people that they've invested in to be able to speed up their learning curve. And just like you said, somebody who's 10 years ahead of where you want to be. Because that's the biggest thing that I think I see all the time. People take advice from people who are in a place, maybe successful, maybe not, a lot of the times not, but they take advice from somebody who is not in the position that they want to trade 10 years from now. If you're over here, like if I'm never trying to be a doctor, but I'm always going, not to say that he doesn't have, or she doesn't have moral advice that they can give me, but if they're giving me advice on business when they're a doctor, it's maybe not the best thing if I'm trying to be an entrepreneur and sell clothing. That it's just so different. So I love the fact that you switch lanes and you said, hey, this was a great person, but let me go ahead and find somebody who's already in my lane that I can be able to bounce ideas off of, so it doesn't look like that I'm missing a piece of where I'm trying to go.
100%. And having that self-awareness, and then having the confidence to be able to make that decision. Or a big thing is, and this as being a business owner, is protecting your time. And so the art of saying no to things, gracefully, professionally, but saying no helps a lot of different people. It helps you. It helps the person you're saying no to. So people think no is a bad thing, but actually helps in so many ways. The thing that you mentioned about coaches that kind of came up as you were talking was, I learned a lot from like the thought leaders that are out there. So like not just my coach, right, Patrick, over in Omaha, but there's people out there that I learned from like years ago, like Gary Vee and Simon Sinek, who's famous for Leaders Eat Last and Start With Why. And like he changed the way that I operate. Like it just, like, these things. Do you have a book that you're about to pull out? Yes, Leaders Eat Last, a great book, right? And it's
Right?
back to, and then that's something I've adopted. And I teach people all the time when I talk to clients or friends or colleagues. I'm like, there's these people that are out there that just, they get it, right? Like Gary Vee gets business and brand. Simon Sinek gets culture and how people operate. And all this stuff is free. Like you can go on Instagram or YouTube and pull up Simon Sinek, Gary Vee. I'm really